If you scroll through your phone today, you'll probably see someone celebrating a birthday. There's a cake, some candles, maybe a chorus of the happy birthday song. It's a tradition so common we barely think about it. This need to mark another year of life isn't new. Humans have been celebrating birthdays in various ways across many ancient civilizations. But how was a birthday celebrated in the Qing Dynasty, China? Was it any different than how it is today? For a poor farming family, a parent's birthday was a major luxury. There was no cake or pile of presents. The celebration might be a single bowl of longevity noodle, with an extra egg if they could afford it. It was a simple act of respect that might mean the whole family had to eat a little less for the rest of the month. For a wealthy merchant family, however, it was a chance to show off. They would set up a grand longevity hall in their home, hire opera troupes to perform for days, and displayed expensive silks and jade given as gifts, trying their best to imitate the grandeur of the imperial court. But for everyone, rich or poor, some birthdays weren't happy milestones, but dangerous hurdles to survive. The ages of 73 and 84, for example, were considered deeply unlucky because they were the ages at which China's greatest sages, Confucius and Mencius, passed away. The thinking was, if even they couldn't survive past that age, what chance do I have? The number 66 was another tricky one, associated with bad luck that needed to be cut through. This belief came from an ancient folk saying, at 66, if you don't die, you'll lose a piece of flesh, which suggests a year of great physical hardship or potential loss. A common ritual to combat this unfortunate year was for a daughter or female relative to prepare 66 small slices of pork for the parent to eat. This was a symbolic exchange, literally cutting the bad luck into manageable pieces and replacing the flesh that they were fated to lose. A birthday party during these dangerous years wasn't a celebration of the milestone, but a protective ritual against it. This was known as passing the barrier. The only way to fight back against this dark fate was to avert disasters by throwing a big, loud party. The lively positive energy was believed to chase away the bad luck and help the person to survive the year. Outside the palace walls, a birthday was a display of status for the rich, and for many, a simple ritual of survival. But inside the Forbidden City, a birthday was something else. It was still a celebration, but also a ritual of power, a public measure of favor, and a symbol of the empire's wealth and stability. Hey everyone, I'm Amy. Today we're going to explore how official birthday celebrations worked for Qing Dynasty empresses and consorts, and uncover the real stories behind some of these most famous and infamous birthdays of the Qing Dynasty inner court. A consort's birthday wasn't just a personal milestone. It was a public report card on her standing with the most powerful man in the world, the emperor. Think of it as a measure of imperial favor, a grand, lavish celebration approved and attended by the emperor sent a clear message to the entire court. This woman is important. Her family is to be respected. On the flip side, a muted, downscaled, or even ignored birthday was a devastating public humiliation. It was a signal that her influence was waning, and in a place where power was everything, that was a dangerous sign. These celebrations were also a masterclass in the harem's rigid hierarchy. At the very top was the Empress Dowager's birthday, known as the Sacred Longevity Festival, or 圣寿节, which could be a massive state-level event. A step below was the Empress's birthday, which was officially called the Festival of 1,000 Autumns, or 千秋节. But the lavish birthday world was only for the very top. Every other consort in the harem, from the high-ranking imperial noble consort down to the humblest attendant, had a birthday that was considered a private, inner court affair. These were often celebrated only by the eunuchs and maids in their own small palace. While a favorite consort's party might be more fancy, it was still just a palace matter. Every koto, every gift, and every seat at the banquet reinforced who was at top and who was at the bottom. On top of all this, not every birthday was created equal. The court made a crucial distinction between a regular annual birthday and a major one. These major, decade-ending birthdays were the big milestones, a 30th, 40th, or even a 60th birthday. While the regular birthday of an important consort might just mean the officials wore special robes for the day, a major birthday was a whole different level of spectacle. On a major birthday, the imperial household department was required to present a standardized set of lavish gifts. The most famous of these is described through modern accounts as the 3 nines box. This wasn't just one box, but a set of 9 in total, filled with symbolic treasures. It would include 3 boxes of auspicious pastries, like 1,000 autumns cake, 3 boxes of fresh, rare fruits, like peaches, symbolizing immortality, and even 3 boxes of rich smoked meats. It was a tangible, delicious symbol of the throne's high favor. So, what did one of these major birthday celebrations actually look like? Let's take a look at an example day of a festival of 1,000 autumns. This was a massive, carefully planned operation that began weeks, if not months, in advance. Long before the first lantern was lit, the emperor's decree would arrive at the imperial household department. Budgets were set. Orders flew out to the imperial workshops for custom porcelain and silk. The Ministry of Rites began drafting the ceremony's protocol down to the exact inch where everyone would stand. On the morning of the celebration, the Forbidden City would stir to life long before the sun rose. From the perspective of a junior eunuch or a young palace maid, the day began in the freezing pre-dawn darkness. Around 3 in the morning, they would be rushing to light thousands of lanterns, sweep courtyards, and transport heavy ceremonial items. Meanwhile, in her own palace, the birthday empress was awakening. For her, the morning was a different kind of ordeal. She would be attended to by her most trusted maids, beginning the hour-long process of being dressed in her finest ceremonial robes and adorned with an array of phoenix hairpins and pearl jewelry. Every layer of silk, every jewel, was a symbol of her rank. This was the moment she would present herself to the court, and she had to look the part of mother of the empire. But before she could receive a single congratulation, she had a critical duty to perform. She first had to go to the palaces of the Empress Dowager and the Emperor to pay them her respects. Now, for the exclusive main ceremony, the guest list wasn't open. It was personally reviewed and approved by the Emperor himself. Attendance was strictly by rank and regulation. As the guests arrived, the hierarchy was on full display. The high-ranking consorts, from imperial noble consorts down to the concubines, were led into the main hall, often the Hall of Union. But the lower ranks, like noble ladies, were completely excluded from this part of the event. Their invitation was for a separate and smaller ceremony later in the day. After the empress made her grand entrance and took her seat, the congratulations began. The consorts inside the hall performed a formal salutation, a complex and physically demanding ritual known as the 6 curtsies, 3 kneels, and 3 bows. For the other women of the harem, this was the ultimate public submission. Only after this grand public ceremony was over did the more private celebration begin. Back in her own palace, the empress would then receive the emperor's sons and grandsons. And this was when the lower-ranking consorts were finally allowed to come and offer their congratulations in person. It was a clear and deliberate separation of the public spectacle from the more private inner court duties. The day would often end with a grand banquet, but only if the emperor gave his explicit permission. Here, the seating chart was a literal map of the power structure. As dozens of symbolic dishes were served, the guests were entertained by opera performances. For the empress's major birthdays, these performances could continue for several days. It was the final act in a long day of carefully organized political theater, where every bite, every bow, and every glance was loaded with meaning. Now that we know the rules and the rituals, let's look at a real-life example of a birthday done on the grandest scale imaginable. This is the story of the 60th birthday of Empress Dowager Chongqing in 1751. Her son was none other than the Emperor Qianlong, who ruled over the Qing dynasty at the absolute height of its power and wealth. Emperor Qianlong was famously devoted to his mother, and for this major 60-year milestone, which was known as a Huajia birthday, he decided to put on a show that the world would never forget. Emperor Qianlong didn't just plan a party inside the palace. He transformed the heart of his capital into a temporary paradise. The plan was for his mother to process from the Xihua Gate of the Forbidden City to the Summer Palace. He turned the entire 5-kilometer route into a breathtaking, continuous spectacle. Officials and princes were tasked with building magnificent temporary installations, elaborate stages for opera, and beautiful pavilions along the entire route. It was like a real-life, moving scroll painting, a perfect, idealized version of the empire created just for her. And the emperor himself acted as the master of ceremonies. It's said that as his 60-year-old mother's procession moved along the route, Qianlong would ride alongside her, pointing out the special displays he had arranged. He commissioned countless works of art in her honor and wrote poetry for her. This wasn't just an emperor ordering a party. It was a son personally showing his love and respect. And he was making sure every single person in the empire saw it. The gifts that poured into the Forbidden City were staggering. As was custom for a major celebration, they arrived in symbolic sets, often 9 by 9, meaning 81 items at a time. Imagine 81 bolts of the finest silk, 81 priceless jade scepters, 81 golden statues. The sheer volume of wealth was a display in itself. The entire celebration was a masterpiece of political theater, broadcasting a clear message. The Qing Empire is stable, it is incredibly wealthy, and it is ruled by a virtuous filial son who holds the mandate of heaven. This celebration became the golden standard, the high watermark against which all future imperial birthdays would be measured. It was so spectacular that the court's best artists were ordered to capture it in incredible detail. We can still see their work today in paintings like the Banquet Joy in the Palace of Cining and the Grand Birthday Scroll. These paintings aren't just beautiful art. They are a historical record of what might have been the grandest birthday party in Chinese history. While most major birthdays were held within the Forbidden City, some of the most unique celebrations happened when the court was on the move. This brings us to the story of Empress Fu Cha, the first and most beloved wife of Emperor Qianlong, and the special and last birthday she celebrated, far from the capital. This was a final, happy memory before everything goes wrong. In 1748, the emperor embarked on a grand eastern tour. He insisted Empress Fu Cha accompany him, and planned for her 37th birthday to be the social high point of their stop in the city of Jinan, the capital of Shandong province. Even before her actual birthday, Emperor Qianlong began the celebrations. After the massive imperial procession arrived in Jinan on March 29th, Qianlong dedicated the very next day, March 30th, entirely to his wife's enjoyment. He arranged a relaxed outing for her, taking her on a pleasure boat across the famous Daming Lake, and later visiting the bubbling Baotu Spring. This personal, happy excursion served as an intimate prelude, setting a festive mood for the formal stay ceremony to come. On the morning of March 31st, her 37th birthday, Jinan was completely transformed. The provincial governor's main office became a temporary forbidden city. It was draped in imperial yellow silk and decorated with dragon insignia, turning a government building into a palace. In the main courtyard, all of the Shandong's highest officials gathered. You had the governor, the provincial treasurer, and the top military commanders, all of them dressed in their finest, heaviest court robes. They stood in a strict formation based on rank, exactly as if they were in Beijing. For these men, this was probably the most nerve-wracking day of their lives. It was their one chance to perform for the emperor in person, and the pressure was immense. When the emperor and empress was seated, these officials performed the full, physically demanding 3 kneelings and 9 prostrations. The whole city would have been buzzing with the excitement of having the Son of Heaven right there, turning a personal birthday into a massive public spectacle. The gifts were also unique, featuring the finest local treasures like Shandong's famous silks, and the emperor himself likely presented her with a poem he had composed just for the occasion. The day was capped off with a grand banquet, where the imperial chefs made a point to feature the local Shandong delicacies, giving the celebration a unique flavor that couldn't be replicated in the Forbidden City. Sadly, this grand celebration on the road would be her last, as she passed away unexpectedly on the journey home. Perhaps because it was her final birthday, and because it was held in such a unique setting with such specific happy memories, it became one of the most well-remembered celebrations of Emperor Qianlong's long reign. After the tragedy of Empress Fucha, the Emperor Qianlong's second empress also fell from grace in an infamous scandal. This left a huge power vacuum at the top of the harem. Stepping into that role, though not the title, was a woman who had risen from a humble background to become the emperor's most trusted companion, imperial noble consort Ling. By the time her 40th birthday rolled around in 1766, she was the undisputed head of the inner court, an uncrowned empress. Because she held this incredibly powerful position, her major birthdays were never going to be a small affair. But the real question was, just how grand would it be? Would it follow the strict protocol for an imperial noble consort, or would the emperor bend the rules for his favorite? The answer is, he didn't just bend the rules, he shattered them. Her 40th birthday was a deliberate political statement, elevating her to an empress's status in all but name. So where did she receive empress-level treatment? Let's start with the ceremony. For a normal consort's birthday, only her own children would be required to pay formal respects. For Consort Ling's birthday, the emperor ordered all of his surviving sons and daughters to perform the full koutou to her. This was a massive deal. He was publicly positioning her as the official matriarch and stepmother to all his children, a role reserved exclusively for the empress. And then there were the gifts and entertainment. So what does an uncrowned empress get for her 40th birthday? The Imperial Household Department presented her with a long list of treasures. This included items like a gold inlaid jade ruyi scepter, a set of 9 formal court robes made with exquisite southern silks, and a full set of golden tableware that weighed hundreds of silver taels. On top of that, records showed she received specific luxury goods like fine jewelry, bolts of the most expensive brocades, and a generous purse of silver from the emperor's personal treasury. While we know she received lavish presents, the real tell was the opera. According to court protocol, a typical consort might get a single performance on her birthday. An imperial noble consort might get 1 full day of opera. For Consort Ling's 40th birthday, the emperor commanded the court opera troupe to perform in her honor for 4 straight days. This was a privilege almost identical to that of an empress, and it sent a shockwave through the palace. He was using the rulebook of court entertainment to publicly declare her importance. This is why her birthday matters. It wasn't just a party, it was an unofficial coronation. Emperor Qianlong had decided not to name another living empress, so he used the theater of a birthday celebration to give Consort Ling all the authority and prestige of the position without the title. The gifts, the ceremonies, and the opera were all tools to cement her power. Every other woman in the palace would have understood the message loud and clear. She is second only to the emperor himself. Now, what happens when a birthday is just a flat-out disaster? This brings us to our final and most infamous story, the 60th birthday of Empress Dowager Cixi in 1894. Now, Cixi wanted to throw a party just as grand as the one Emperor Qianlong threw for his mother, but her ambition was even bigger. For years, she has been overseeing a massive, costly project, the complete reconstruction of the Summer Palace, which had been destroyed by foreign troops decades earlier. Her 60th birthday was going to be the grand unveiling and also the perfect excuse to finally finish this personal project of passion. She planned a huge city-wide procession that would lead right to the palace's glorious new gates. There was just one tiny little problem. On July 25th, in 1894, a massive war broke out. The First Sino-Japanese War, and China started to lose badly. The nation's brand new navy was getting crushed, and soldiers were dying. And this is where things got complicated. The reconstruction of the Summer Palace was extremely expensive, and Cixi did not have a Summer Palace budget. For many years, in order to pay for this massive renovation, the money was taken from the navy. So how did she pull this off? Well, it turns out that Empress Dowager Cixi had appointed her brother-in-law and close confidant, Prince Chun, to oversee the navy in 1885. She then also assigned him to oversee the initial stages of the reconstruction of the Summer Palace. He set up a corrupt system where the navy and the Summer Palace, although unrelated, were both funded through the navy's budget. Did somebody say conflict of interest? To support the system, Cixi claimed that the project wasn't officially for her personal enjoyment. The excuse was that since she had retired in 1889, she needed a new palace to supervise the government from. I think we understood the word retired differently. But this clever trick allowed the renovations to be justified as a state expense. And that's how, for years, funds that were supposed to be used to buy modern battleships were instead used to build new pavilions, landscape gardens, and most famously, the giant and utterly useless marble boat. The Chinese Navy was literally running out of ammunition, while money was being spent on party decorations. Historians debate the exact amount of money that was moved around, but it was easily in the millions of taels. And it wasn't like Cixi just cracked open a piggy bank labeled Navy. It was a systematic choice to prioritize vanity projects over national defense, year after year. Was the party money the only reason China lost the war? Of course not. The real story is always more complicated. The Qing dynasty military had been rotting from the inside for years, with deep-rooted corruption, commanders who hated each other more than the enemy, and a failure to keep up with Japan's modern weapons. But the story of the Summer Palace and the naval funds became the perfect symbol of all that rot. It was the one story that everyone could point to as the most shameless and infuriating example of an empire that had completely lost its way. Officials sent petitions begging Cixi to cancel the party and focus on the war, but she refused. It was only after a humiliating naval defeat of the Beiyang fleet at the Battle of the Yalu River on September 17, 1894, that she was finally forced to cancel the grand public parade. A private party was still held inside the Forbidden City, and it was still incredibly lavish. But the damage was done. The whole affair made the government look corrupt, incompetent, and completely out of touch with its people. Cixi's reputation never recovered. The story of her birthday party became a symbol of everything that was wrong with the late Qing dynasty. Years later, for her 70th birthday, the anger was still so raw that a revolutionary writer named Zhang Taiyan wrote a famous sarcastic birthday wish for her. At a time when speaking out against the throne could mean death, his protest was incredibly bold. His original poem was a formal literary jab at the court, but its brutal message was quickly captured in a popular, simpler retelling that spread like wildfire among the people. It went like this. At 50, you lost Ryukyu. At 60, you lost Taiwan. And now you are going to lose Manchuria. Every time we celebrated your long life, we watched our country's border shrink. It was a brutal summary of how the people of that time felt. Her personal celebrations came at the cost of the nation itself. When you put it all together, it's pretty clear that these birthday parties were more than just parties. They were like a health check for the entire dynasty. Emperor Qianlong's celebration for his mom worked so well because the empire was actually healthy. It was rich, it was stable, and the party was just showing everyone what they already knew. Empress Dowager Cixi was trying to use the same playbook, but the empire was falling apart. You can't just throw a party to pretend everything was okay when the country is losing a war. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? At what point does trying to look strong actually end up making you look incredibly weak? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed today's topic, don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you want to support this channel and help me uncover more fascinating stories from Chinese history, please check out my membership. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Stay curious, stay magical.